So 10 years ago, I would have been 19 and I, like most teenagers, lived at home with my mum, and then I moved into student accommodation as I started university. So I went to the University of Bedfordshire in Luton, and I was actually still working part-time in London. So I had a job at Boots concession called Mini Club. So I had to commute to and from London at least twice a week. Then I eventually got a second job on the weekends for a Kurt Geiger concession in Debenhams. So as a full-time student who has just moved out of home and is now juggling two part-time jobs, the challenge of being away from home, being away from, friends, family and just surroundings, and then trying to manage their finances. It was a lot. Eventually, I managed to get a transfer for my job at Mini Club to the Luton branch. To be honest, even though both my jobs were scheduled to work around my studies, I was still finding it hard to find a balance. And eventually I left my job at Mini Club and only worked the weekends at Kurt Geiger. But I was still young, inexperienced, and didn't have any financial knowledge on how to budget. To just cut to the chase, spend my student finance, some of my student finance that was supposed to go towards my rent, on a car. But ultimately that left me in about 2 months rent arrears. It started with letters, and then they eventually changed my locks. And bear in mind, I haven't told anyone at home. Nobody, none of my friends know. Me and my mum wasn't speaking by this point. But because I was struggling so much to find a balance between work and my studies, I was missing a lot of my lectures. I was really down at the time due to my absences, poor attendance, and overall irresponsibility when it came to my studies. I ended up failing my first year, and I didn't feel like I was in the right frame of mind to continue. I had a boyfriend at the time. He lived in London. Once I eventually told him what was happening and that I was being evicted, he said I could come and stay at his. Even though his family were more than welcoming, it was only supposed to be temporary. But temporary turned to 2 years, and in that space of time, I just continued to work. I changed jobs quite a few times. I started to save up for the first time. I really tried to get housed somehow, even though as a single woman with no children, I wasn't classed as a housing priority. But I tried anyways. I went to all the councils, all the housing associations, all the organisations that I found. I found organisations that I didn't even know about. I remember I was on a waiting list, and I was on it for a very long time. I was probably still on it by the time I moved into my hostel, because I never heard from them. But it was a good little scheme that they did, where you stayed in like a shared flat or house, and then eventually they would give you your flat. And I always held on to a sheet that I got from the housing office with a list of hostels on, and I called a few, but then there was this one in Westminster called St. Louise, and I called them. They didn't have anything available. However, their waiting list was nowhere near as long as a lot of the others. They put me on the waiting list because they told me that something was about to come available. And I literally just think this was a thing of timing, because like I said, everywhere else either turned me away or there was a long waiting list. Yeah, I moved into the hostel, and my hostel was all female, women over age 21. You couldn't have any addictions. You couldn't have any, mental health problems. You couldn't have even children. You couldn't have children in that hostel. I now had the space and peace of mind to be able to figure my life out from there.